The tragic story of the murder of transgender 16-year-old Brianna Ghey takes a new turn now. The murderers can be named by the media when they're sentenced in February. That's an interesting wrinkle that we might explore with a legal expert. Let's turn to Joseph Kotrie-Monson, who's legal commentator and director of Mary Monson Solicitors firm on Fleet Street, joining me now. The decision from Mrs. Justice Yip, did it surprise you? Good morning.
Good morning, Nick. Well, I mean, not as a human being, really, I think is the answer as to whether it surprised me, the horrific nature of a crime such as this, with real calculated, I think, and sadistic overtones. Historically, the right to anonymity has been outweighed in cases involving children, whether they are witnesses or defendants or victims. It's been outweighed by the public interest, not in many cases. I think in 2014, we saw in that Will Cornick case, the murder of the teacher Anne Maguire, that in some specific circumstances, identification was in the public interest because of a deterrent effect. I'm not sure that that's the case here. I think the comments of the Red Judge, the High Court Judge on the Northern Circuit, Mrs. Justice Yip, were revelatory, however. It's an exceptional case, she said, but she said that on the one hand, the public will naturally wish to know the identities of the young people. You can see that. You've heard me say just a few weeks ago, Nick, justice should be seen to be done. She also, however, pointed out, and I think this is crucial, that in cases such as this, it's inevitable that the people will be named once they turn 18. They were 15 at the time, and there's no way they won't be in prison still at 18. What's more likely is if the case continues to garner this kind of fascination, and in some quarters, I guess, a kind of ghoulish, voyeuristic fascination, but, you know, just revulsion from most right-thinking people, I think, on release, because release will come, that we'll be seeing an application for a whole life anonymity order. And you'll remember in the John Venables case, one was granted, and that was because in that case...
That was the murder of James Bolger, John Venables
Absolutely.
And Robert Thompson. On you go, Joseph.
Yeah, it was interesting. The judge in the High Court of the Family Division of the High Court said that in that case it was appropriate, not because a defendant or a past convict for murder should be given an easy ride, but because the uniquely notorious, I think was the quote, Venables, needed to be prevented from being put to death, because we don't have the death penalty, we don't have vigilantism legislated by the state, and of course those protections and necessities kick in once somebody's out of the system. But make no mistake, Nick, these are two defendants who will have a path through prison that will be uniquely bespoke. There is talk of autism, there is talk of extreme sadism and what looks like quite obvious psychopathy in respect of, I think she's called Girl Y in this case. I don't think anonymity will be something that will particularly colour their jail experience.
Lawyers for the pair, you'll be aware, Joseph, had argued that anonymity order would mean lifting the anonymity order, sorry to clarify, could mean potential dangerous ramifications for the families. What of that?
Well, I think the families of a defendant in these types of circumstances, I can certainly see that. I don't think that families of victims, and I'm not quite sure of the context, but the interesting comments of the incredibly, and you've heard me use this phrase about victims' families in the past, but particularly apt here, Nick, I think, noble and restrained parents of Brianna Ghey. The mother saying, although, as you rightly quote, you know, no sympathy for the individuals, nevertheless, in one quote I've seen, pointing out that there are three grieving sets of parents here, tremendously complex, senseless. We seek to understand this because we see something so shocking. Knowing the names is part of that, but the reality is there's no rationalization of this. It's about as close to the senselessness of evil that you and I can get.
Joseph Kotrie-Monson, thank you for your time. You're legal commentator and director of the firm Mary Monson Solicitors on Fleet Street in London.